The day the world stopped. The morning started like any other, but the world did not know that history was about to change. The sun had barely risen when headlines began flashing across news channels and mobile screens. The bold words felt like a thunderclap in the quiet of dawn. Elon Musk cuts 10,000 jobs in one day. People gasped, offices buzzed, and social media exploded with anger, fear, and disbelief. Some were furious, others defended the move, but one truth was clear. 10,000 families had just lost their stability overnight. Inside homes across America, fathers sat silently staring at bills on the table. Mothers cried quietly in kitchens, and young graduates who had just stepped into the world of dreams suddenly saw the ground vanish beneath their feet. Yet, while the chaos spread across the world, in another corner of the globe, Sundar Pichai sat quietly in his office at Google headquarters, sipping tea as he scrolled through the same headlines. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a weight that words could not describe. Sundar had always believed that technology was not just about machines or codes, but about people. He often said to his teams, "Every line of code we write touches a human life." And now 10,000 human lives had been shaken in a single announcement. He leaned back in his chair and thought about his own childhood in Chennai, India. He remembered the small house where electricity came and went, where his mother managed with very little, and his father struggled but never gave up. Sundar knew what it meant to live with uncertainty. He knew the fear of not knowing how the next month would look, and he knew the courage it took for parents to put on a smile when inside they were breaking. That memory hit him harder than the news itself. The door opened quietly, and one of his closest advisors, Mira, stepped in. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "Sundar, the news is everywhere. Markets are shaking, tech forums are burning. Employees across Silicon Valley are scared. What do you want to do?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned his chair towards the window. Outside, the California sky was a perfect blue, yet inside the hearts of thousands, storm clouds were gathering. Sundar finally spoke, slowly but firmly. "We are not just building products, we are shaping lives. If we stand silent today, we are no different than those who see numbers instead of people. I need to understand their pain. I need to feel it myself." Mira frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked at her with an expression she had seen only a few times before, moments before Sundar made decisions that shocked the world. "I am going undercover," he said quietly. Mira's eyes widened. "Undercover? Sundar, that's dangerous. You are the CEO of Google. How can you just walk into this storm?" Sundar smiled faintly. "Sometimes to understand people, you have to stop being a CEO and start being one of them. If thousands are losing jobs, I cannot sit in this glass tower and just read headlines. I need to step into their shoes, hear their voices, and feel their struggle." The room went silent. Mira could not argue because deep inside she knew Sundar was right. Outside, the ripple effect of Elon's decision was growing larger. TV anchors debated whether it was a bold business move or an act of cruelty. Economists drew charts, analysts predicted chaos, but none of them sat in the living rooms of those who had just lost everything. None of them knew the names of the children who would soon ask, "Mama, why are you crying?" Meanwhile, in one small apartment in San Francisco, a young engineer named Arjun packed his belongings into a cardboard box. Just 2 weeks ago, he had proudly called his parents in India to tell them he got a job in the United States. They had borrowed money to pay for his flight, believing he was building a future. Now, tears blurred his eyes as he folded the same dream into a box. In another city, Lisa, a single mother of 2, stared at her email in disbelief. Her job was gone, her rent was due, and her children were still asleep in the other room. She whispered to herself, "How will I tell them?" These stories multiplied by 10,000, each one carrying the same weight, the same heartbreak. And Sundar knew this was not just about jobs, it was about dignity, about survival, about hope. He called his driver and told him to cancel all meetings for the day. "I need to walk alone," Sundar said. Hours later, he found himself walking through the streets of Palo Alto, wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, blending into the crowd. Nobody recognized him as the CEO of Google. To them, he was just another man lost in thought. He entered a small cafe where the atmosphere was heavy with whispers about layoffs. Groups of people sat around tables, their faces pale, their voices hushed. Sundar took a seat in the corner and listened. One man slammed his coffee cup on the table. 10 years I gave them. 10 years. And in one email, I am nothing. A woman beside him tried to hold back her tears. I told my daughter she could join ballet classes this summer. How do I tell her now that I cannot afford it? An older man muttered, we are just numbers to them, nothing more. Sundar's heart tightened. He wanted to stand up and tell them, you are not numbers, you matter, but he stayed quiet, observing, listening, feeling their pain. Just then, the door opened, and a young girl walked in, holding her father's hand. She could not have been more than 8 years old. She tugged at her father's sleeve and whispered loudly, Daddy, did they fire you too? The entire cafe went silent. The father froze, his face turning red with shame. He pulled his daughter close and whispered, not now, sweetheart. But it was too late. Everyone had heard. Sundar's chest ached. That single question from an innocent child cut deeper than any financial chart or headline. This was the real tragedy. The way children would carry scars of fear and uncertainty because of decisions made in boardrooms far away. As Sundar left the cafe, the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. He knew he could not change the past, but he could change what came next. He whispered to himself, this is bigger than Elon. This is about humanity, and I will not stay silent. But just as he reached the street corner, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The words made his heart race. Mr. Pichai, if you try to help them, you will regret it. Some forces are watching. He stared at the screen, shocked. Someone already knew what he was planning, even before he had told anyone beyond Mira. Someone powerful did not want him to interfere. For the first time in years, Sundar felt a chill of fear run down his spine. The crowd around him moved normally, people walking, cars honking, the city alive. But to Sundar, everything felt different. Shadows seemed longer, whispers seemed sharper. Who was watching him and why? He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but the message kept burning in his mind. If he stepped forward, he would be walking into a storm bigger than he imagined. And yet, as he looked back at the cafe, at the father holding his daughter's hand, Sundar knew he had no choice. His journey had just begun. The message in the shadows. Sundar stood frozen on the street corner, the phone still heavy in his pocket, though he had already slipped it away. The words of that anonymous message repeated in his mind like an echo he could not silence. If you try to help them, you will regret it. The chill that ran down his spine was not only from fear, but from realization. Someone powerful, maybe more powerful than he thought, was paying attention to his every move. He had lived his life surrounded by technology, and he knew better than anyone that nothing sent digitally was ever truly private. But this message felt different. It was not a business rival, not a random hacker. There was an intent behind it, an intent that was both personal and threatening. As he walked back towards his car, his eyes scanned the street. Was someone following him? Every passerby suddenly looked suspicious. The man leaning against the lamppost, the woman scrolling through her phone, even the car parked too long near the curb. They all seemed like possible watchers. Sundar rarely felt unsafe in public, but today, every step reminded him that the moment he chose to act, invisible forces would push against him. Later that evening, in his office at Google, Mira was waiting for him. She had been restless since he walked out earlier. When she saw him step inside, her relief was obvious, but the look on his face told her something had happened. "What is it, Sundar?" she asked quietly. He pulled out his phone, placed it on the desk, and showed her the message. Her hand flew to her mouth. "This is serious. Whoever sent this, they know what you're thinking even before you've made it public. This isn't just a warning. It's surveillance." Sundar nodded slowly. "Exactly. And that means someone does not want me to even try." But the more they want to stop me, the more I know I must continue. Because if fear can silence me, then what hope do those families have? Mira hesitated. But Sundar, we have to think carefully. Elon Musk is not just a CEO. He is a force of nature. If he decided to cut 10,000 jobs, there are reasons bigger than we can imagine. Stepping into this might put you in direct conflict with him. And not just him, others may stand behind him. Sundar leaned forward, his voice firm. Mira, when I was a child, my father taught me something. He said, son, when you see injustice, you have two choices. Either close your eyes and walk away, or open your heart and step forward, even if your legs shake with fear. I cannot walk away, not this time. As he spoke, memories from his childhood swirled back. How his father once gave away half his monthly salary to help a neighbor who had lost his job. How his mother secretly skipped meals so he and his brother could eat more. These lessons had carved his soul, and now they pushed him forward. But before he could decide on his first step, Mira leaned closer and whispered, if they are watching you, Sundar, then we need to know who they are. The next morning, Sundar arrived at the Google campus not as the CEO in a suit, but as a man with a plan. He met privately with a small, trusted group of engineers who specialized in cybersecurity and digital forensics. These were the kinds of people who rarely appeared in news but quietly protected billions of users every day. Sundar told them, without revealing too much, that he had received a threat. He wanted to know its origin. The team worked silently for hours, tracing, decoding, peeling away layers of encryption. But what they found was shocking. The message did not trace back to a foreign hacker, not even to a shadowy underground network. It was routed through servers that belonged to a powerful consulting firm in Silicon Valley. A firm that had close ties to multiple tech giants, including Elon Musk's ventures. Mira's voice trembled when she read the report. This isn't random, Sundar. This is organized. Someone in the highest circles doesn't want you to interfere. Sundar sat quietly, absorbing the weight of the discovery. It was no longer just about jobs or layoffs. It was about power, about control, about a system that saw human lives as pieces on a chessboard. That evening, he took a quiet walk outside, blending with the crowd once again. He found himself near a park bench where a small group of laid-off employees had gathered. They had formed an informal support circle trying to console one another. Sundar sat on a bench nearby, listening. A young man spoke first, his voice raw with bitterness. Elon said it's about efficiency. But what about loyalty? What about the nights we stayed awake building his dreams? What about the families who believed in us? A woman beside him shook her head. We are nothing to them. We are disposable. I don't even know how to tell my kids we can't afford school anymore. Then, an older man, probably in his 50s, spoke quietly, his eyes full of sorrow. I gave everything to my work, and now, I feel like I have nothing left to give. Sundar's chest ached as he listened. Their voices were echoes of his own past, of every struggle he had seen growing up. These were not just employees. They were fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, each one carrying a story, each one carrying dreams. When he returned home that night, he could not sleep. He sat by the window, staring into the darkness, thinking about the message, the fear, the people. His phone lay on the table, silent, yet the words still burned in his memory. You will regret it. But he whispered to himself, I am not afraid of regret. I'm afraid of doing nothing. Still, the question haunted him. How far would the forces behind that message go to stop him? The next morning, as he prepared to leave for the office, his driver hesitated at the gate. Sir, the driver said softly, your car, it has a flat tire, but it doesn't look normal. It looks like someone cut it. Sundar froze. His heart thudded. This was no coincidence. The warning had just turned into action. He looked around the quiet street, but the silence felt dangerous. He knew then, without a doubt, that his decision to step forward would not only test his courage but might also put him in real danger. He clenched his fists, breathed deeply, and thought of the little girl in the cafe asking her father if he had been fired too. That image gave him strength. He whispered, "I cannot stop now." But in the shadows, someone was already watching, already planning the next move to silence him. Breaking the silence, Sundar stood by the car, staring at the flat tire that looked anything but accidental. The morning air was crisp, but inside he felt a heat of anger mixing with unease. He had faced challenges all his life, but this was different. This was not competition, not business pressure, not criticism in the media. This was a direct warning, a shadow reaching into his life to remind him that if he moved forward, he would not walk unchallenged. His driver looked uneasy, his voice almost trembling. "Sir, should I call the police? This is not safe." Sundar shook his head slowly. "No, not yet. We don't know who did this. And if we make it public too soon, they will only go deeper underground. Let them think I am afraid, but I am not." Still, when he walked back into his home, his wife noticed something different in his face. She asked softly, "What is troubling you?" He paused, debating whether to tell her. But then he looked into her eyes that had always carried strength. When he faltered, eyes that had seen him through his toughest battles. He told her about the message, about the tire, about the threat that now followed him like a shadow. She listened in silence, and when he finished, she took his hand. "You have always lived with humility and courage. But remember, courage does not mean walking into fire without thinking. Courage means standing firm when the fire comes, but also protecting those who depend on you. Promise me you will not fight recklessly." Her words stayed in his heart. He knew she was right. This was not just his fight anymore. It was about protecting the people he loved, and the thousands of families who now looked at the future with despair. Later that day, he returned to the Google campus, but instead of entering through the main doors, he asked to be taken to a smaller entrance. He wanted to move without attracting attention. Inside, Mira was waiting for him with new reports. She looked pale. "Sundar, things are worse than we thought," she said. "The consulting firm we traced the message to, it is connected not just to Elon's companies, but to a group of investors who have stakes across multiple industries. If you challenge their decision, you are not just opposing Elon, you are threatening an entire network of power." Sundar leaned against the table, his mind racing. "So it's not about efficiency. It's not even about jobs. This is about money, control, and influence." Mira nodded. "Exactly. They are afraid that if someone like you publicly stands against this decision, others will follow. It could spark a wave of resistance, and that is what they fear most." The room felt heavier with every word. Sundar realized that what he was about to do could set off a chain reaction far beyond Silicon Valley. But at the same time, he also felt clarity. If silence would protect his safety but betray thousands of families, then silence was not an option. Still, before making any move, he decided to step closer to the people who were living through this nightmare. That evening, he quietly visited a community hall where some of the laid-off workers had organized a meeting. He wore simple clothes, blending into the crowd, just another man slipping into the back of the room. The hall was filled with raw emotion. Some people spoke with anger, others with despair, and a few with broken voices that carried more pain than words could describe. A young woman stood up, her hands trembling. "My husband and I both worked there. Today we are both jobless. How? Do I pay rent? How do I keep food on the table? Do these billionaires even know what it feels like to tell your child there's nothing for dinner?" Her words cut through the room like a knife. Several people began to cry silently. Sundar felt his throat tighten, but he forced himself to stay quiet. He wanted to stand, to speak, but this was their space. Then, an older man took the microphone. His hair was gray, his shoulders slightly bent, but his voice carried the weight of years. "I gave 30 years of my life to this industry. I believed in the dream of building a future, and now they tell me I am too old, too slow, not needed anymore. I don't know what hurts more, the job loss or the betrayal." The hall went silent. Every eye was heavy with grief. Sundar's chest felt like it was being crushed. These were not numbers on a chart. These were lives unraveling. After the meeting, as people began to leave, Sundar quietly stepped outside. He stood alone near the corner of the hall, lost in thought. But then, unexpectedly, a boy, maybe 12 years old, walked up to him. His eyes were wide and filled with innocence. He tugged on Sundar's sleeve and asked, "Mister, do you know if my dad will get his job back? He told me we might have to leave our house, but I really don't want to leave. All my friends are here." Sundar froze. He looked down at the boy, speechless. His heart cracked open in that moment. This was no longer just about employees. It was about children, about futures being stolen quietly in the night. He bent down, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and whispered, "Your dad is stronger than you know. Don't lose hope." The boy nodded, though he clearly did not understand the depth of the storm his family was in. Then he walked away, leaving Sundar standing there with a single tear escaping down his cheek. When Meera called him later that night to discuss strategies, Sundar's voice was firm. "We cannot wait any longer. I need to act, but we must be careful. They are watching me, and now they are moving against me." Meera hesitated. "What are you planning?" Sundar's reply was calm but heavy. "I am going to speak. Not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a human being. If they want silence, I will give the world a voice instead." But just as he hung up, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, it was not just words. It was a photo. The photo showed his wife walking near a grocery store, unaware she was being followed. The message below read, "We warned you. Protect your family. Step back now." Sundar's hands shook for the first time in years. The battle was no longer about corporations. It had just become personal. The weight of family Sundar sat in the dim light of his study, the photo of his wife on the phone screen burning into his eyes. She looked so unaware, just carrying a bag of groceries, her expression calm and ordinary. But to him, that photo was a threat more powerful than any words. It was a message that said, "We can reach the people you love most, whenever we want." For a man who had always valued privacy and security, this was a wound deeper than any business attack. His hands trembled as he placed the phone down on the desk. His mind was torn between two worlds, the world of responsibility as a CEO, a leader who carried the voices of thousands of workers, and the world of a husband and father who would give everything to protect his family. Never before had the two collided with such violence. His wife entered the room quietly, sensing something was wrong. She saw his pale face, the way he avoided her eyes. "Sundar, what is it?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then showed her the photo. Her breath caught in her throat and her hand went to her mouth. Silence filled the room for a long moment, broken only by the faint hum of the night outside. Finally, she whispered, "They are watching me?" Sundar nodded, his voice heavy. "Yes, they want me to step back. They think fear will silence me." Her eyes glistened, but instead of collapsing in fear, she reached for his hand. "Do not let them win, Sundar. They think power means control. But true power is not fear. It is courage. If you step back now, they will not stop. They will keep treating people like numbers, and no one will dare to speak again. You always told me that leadership is not about titles, but about responsibility. This is your test." He squeezed her hand, his heart torn. She was right, but the thought of her or their children being in danger was unbearable. Still, he understood what was at stake. If he gave in now, the silence would be louder than his voice could ever be. The next morning, Meera arrived at his office and found Sundar sitting in silence, staring at the skyline. "You saw the photo," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "They are watching my family." She lowered her voice. "Do you still want to continue?" He turned to her, his eyes burning with determination. "More than ever, because now I know how far they are willing to go, and if I give in, I am telling every family that fear is stronger than justice. I will not allow that." Meera's shoulders relaxed slightly. She had feared he might back down, but instead she saw a side of Sundar she had only glimpsed in rare moments. The fire that came not from ambition, but from conviction. Later that day, Sundar gathered a small circle of trusted allies inside Google. These were people who had stood with him for years, not because of his title, but because of his integrity. He told them everything, not just about the layoffs, but about the threats, the surveillance, the danger. The room was tense, but when he finished, no one walked away. Instead, one of the engineers, a quiet man named David, leaned forward and said, "If they are watching you, then let them. But we will watch them back. You are not alone." Sundar felt a weight lift. If only, slightly. He had allies, and with them he could begin to push back. But outside those walls, the storm was still raging. Families across the country were holding protests. Workers were marching in front of offices, and hashtags about the layoffs were trending on every platform. While Elon Musk remained silent, choosing not to respond to the growing backlash, Sundar began to notice something strange. In the protests, people were starting to chant his name, not as the man responsible, but as the one they hoped would stand up for them. Sundar will help us. Pichai will not stay silent. These chants spread like wildfire until suddenly, the weight of expectation fell on him more heavily than ever. People who had never met him were placing their hope in his hands. One evening, as he drove through the city quietly, he passed by a protest outside a tech park. He rolled the window down just slightly, enough to hear the cries of the crowd. He saw young workers holding signs that read, "We are not numbers," and mothers carrying babies while demanding dignity. He saw the same pain he had witnessed in the cafe and the community hall, but now amplified by the voices of hundreds. His chest tightened. This was not just about one decision anymore. This was about the soul of an industry, maybe even the soul of leadership itself. When he returned home that night, he sat with his children before bed. They laughed. They told him stories about school, and for a moment, he forgot the weight pressing on him. But then as he kissed them goodnight, he realized that everything he was about to do was not only for the families outside, but also for his own children. He wanted them to grow up in a world where leaders valued kindness as much as power. But just as he walked out of their room, his phone buzzed again. He froze, afraid of what he would see. This time, the message was short but terrifying. "We warned you. Tomorrow, we make the first move." His blood ran cold. He stared at the words, his mind racing. What did they mean by the first move? Was it another warning? Was it a direct attack? He showed the message to Mira immediately. She read it, her face pale. "Sundar, this means they are not waiting anymore. Tomorrow something will happen. They are planning it already." Sundar clenched his fists. Then tomorrow we must be ready. But inside, he knew he was stepping into the most dangerous moment of his life. The storm arrives the morning after the message. Sundar woke before dawn. The house was still quiet, his children asleep, his wife resting softly, but he could not close his eyes anymore. The words burned in his mind. Tomorrow, we make the first move. Well, today was tomorrow, and he had no idea what was coming. He dressed simply, poured himself a cup of tea, and walked to the balcony. The streets below were calm. The world looked ordinary, but he knew beneath the calm there was an invisible war being prepared. He could feel it in his chest, a strange heaviness that would not go away. When he arrived at the Google campus, Mira was already waiting for him, her face tense. "Security has been tightened," she whispered as they walked. "We've checked the perimeter twice, but the truth is if they want to move against you, they will find a way." Sundar nodded. He had already accepted this truth. He was not fighting a single person. He was fighting a system that thrived on fear. Around mid-morning, he was in a private meeting with a few senior engineers when the first blow landed. The large screens in the room suddenly flickered, and within seconds, the entire Google network went down. Silence filled the room. Then phones began buzzing. Alerts, messages, emergency calls. A massive cyber attack was underway. "This isn't random," one engineer muttered, his voice shaking. "This is coordinated." The attack spread like wildfire. Products began to stall. Services froze. Millions of users across the world started reporting failures. Google, a company built on resilience, had been struck at its core. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on a giant heart that beat across the planet. Mira rushed in, her face pale. This is it. This is the move they warned us about. They're not after money. They're after chaos. They want to break your credibility. They want the world to see you fall. Sundar's mind raced. This was more than a threat. It was a message to him, delivered through the collapse of the empire he was leading. If Google could be shaken even for an hour, his voice would lose weight. People would say he could not protect his own company, so how could he protect thousands of laid-off workers? He stood still for a long moment, his thoughts sharp, his heart steady. Then he spoke firmly. Activate every backup, bring the best people we have, but do not announce panic. We will show them that no matter how hard they strike, we will not collapse. Hours passed like minutes. Engineers worked desperately, their faces sweating under the glow of monitors. Commands flew, firewalls rose, systems were patched, servers restarted. But the attack was relentless, waves of code smashing against them like a storm against a fragile shore. In the middle of the chaos, Sundar moved among his people, not shouting, not panicking, but calmly placing a hand on shoulders, whispering words of courage. You are not fighting alone. Together we are stronger, do not give up. His calmness spread through the room like light through darkness. Slowly the tide began to turn. By evening, systems were stabilizing. One by one, services came back online. The worst was over, at least for now. When the final alert cleared, exhausted cheers erupted in the room. People hugged, some even cried. But Sundar stood silent, his eyes dark. He knew this was not victory. This was only the beginning. Late that night, as he sat in his office, Mira walked in quietly. We traced the attack, she said. It was routed through multiple shells, but one thing stood out. The final server was linked to the same consulting firm as the threatening message. This is proof, Sundar. Someone in the highest levels of Silicon Valley wants you destroyed. Sundar closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Then we know the enemy. But we also know their weakness. They fear truth. They fear a voice that cannot be bought. That is why they attack. Mira hesitated, then asked, What will you do now? Sundar looked out the window, the city lights shining in the night. I will speak. Tomorrow the world will hear me. Not in secret meetings, not in whispers, but openly. If they want silence, they will face the opposite. Mira's eyes widened. You mean a public statement? He nodded. Not just a statement. A message to every family, every worker, every child who feels forgotten. If they want to scare me into silence, then my answer must be louder than their threats. But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed again. His hands tightened around it as he unlocked the screen. This time, the message was not just words or a photo. It was a live video feed. His wife was on the screen, walking alone in a parking lot. A shadowy figure followed her slowly, step by step. The message beneath the video read, Speak tomorrow, and she will not walk home. Sundar felt his heart stop. The room seemed to close in around him. The decision that had felt so clear moments ago now felt like a knife against his throat. The voice that shook the world, Sundar, sat frozen, his eyes locked on the live video feed of his wife walking through the parking lot. The figure behind her moved slowly, almost lazily, but with every step, Sundar's heart thudded louder. The message beneath the video was clear. Speak tomorrow, and she will not walk home. It was the cruelest choice a man could face. Silence, to protect his family, or courage to protect countless others and risk everything he held dear. For a long time, he did not move. The world outside continued as usual. Cars passed, phones rang, life moved on. But inside him, time felt broken. His wife was more than his partner. She was his strength, his anchor, the one who had stood with him when he was just a boy with dreams in a small Indian city. Losing her was unthinkable. Mira saw the torment on his face and whispered, Sundar, Maybe you should step back. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It is survival. He turned to her, his voice trembling but steady. Mira, if I step back, today I am telling the world that fear is stronger than truth. If I give in, then every leader tomorrow will think silence is the safer choice. And what will happen to the families who depend on us? What will happen to the children crying because their parents cannot feed them? I cannot allow fear to decide for me. Mira's eyes glistened with tears. Then you must be ready for what comes. That night, Sundar returned home. He looked at his wife and held her close longer than usual, as if he was imprinting her presence into his heart. He did not tell her about the live video. He could not break her spirit with that knowledge, but she felt his arms tighten and whispered, "Whatever storm comes, we will face it together." The next morning, the world woke to rumors. Social media buzzed with whispers that Sundar Pichai was preparing to make a statement about the mass layoffs. People waited, some with hope, others with doubt, and many with fear. When Sundar finally stepped onto the stage at a press conference called at the last minute, the room was packed, cameras flashed, journalists filled every corner, and the air was thick with anticipation. He stood at the podium, not with the polished confidence of a CEO giving a quarterly update, but with the quiet intensity of a man carrying the weight of thousands of lives. He took a deep breath, looked around the room, and began to speak. Yesterday, 10,000 jobs were cut in one decision. 10,000 families woke up today without certainty, without answers, without hope. Some call it efficiency. Some call it strategy. But I call it what it truly is, pain. Pain that spreads from parents to children, from homes to entire communities. Pain that is invisible on balance sheets but loud in the hearts of people. The room went silent. No one had heard a CEO speak like this before. He continued, his voice stronger now. I was told to stay silent. I was warned that if I speak, I will regret it. I was even threatened in ways that strike at the people I love most. But I cannot stay silent. Because if fear silences us, then what kind of leaders are we? Leadership is not about how much power we hold, but how much responsibility we carry. And today, my responsibility is not just to shareholders or to markets. It is to people. Journalists scribbled frantically. Cameras zoomed in. The world leaned closer. That is why I am announcing today, Sundar said firmly, that Google will create a program to hire, retrain and support as many of the 10,000 laid-off workers as possible. Not just with jobs, but with dignity. We will open our doors to those who have been left behind. We will partner with other companies, willing to step forward, and we will build a safety net where others have cut one apart. We cannot replace every job, but we can replace despair with hope. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, then applause. But Sundar was not finished. And to those who threatened me, to those who believe fear can silence truth, I say this. Your power ends where courage begins. You can watch me, you can follow me, you can try to break me, but you cannot break the belief that people matter more than profits. This belief is stronger than any threat, stronger than any shadow. By the time he stepped away from the podium, the world had changed. News channels across continents carried his words live. Protests outside turned into celebrations. Laid off. Workers cried openly as they watched the speech on their phones. Hashtags shifted from despair to hope. Pichai speaks for us. Courage over fear. We are not numbers. But behind the scenes, in a quiet office far away, a group of powerful men sat watching the broadcast. Their faces were dark, their jaws tight. One of them slammed his fist on the table. He was warned, yet he speaks. This is not over. And even as Sundar returned home, greeted by his wife's relieved smile and his children's laughter, he knew this battle was not truly finished. He had lit a fire, but fire always attracts wind. That night, as he sat by the window, Mira called him. Sundar, do you realize what you did today? You gave people hope. But you also declared war on those who profit from silence. They will come harder now. Sundar looked at the sky, the stars hidden by the city lights, and whispered, Let them come. If they want a war of fear, then we will answer with a war of kindness. because kindness is the one thing they will never understand. His phone buzzed once again. A single new message appeared. You may have won today, but tomorrow, the real game begins. Sundar stared at the screen, his lips curling into the faintest smile. The fear was still there, but above it was something stronger. Resolve. And in that quiet moment, one truth became clear. This was no longer just about one CEO or one company. It was about the kind of world humanity would choose to build. And Sundar had just shown that sometimes the most unbelievable thing a leader can do is not protect himself, but protect everyone else.